Hi everyone, my name's Professor Becky Early. I'm going to be your chair this afternoon for this event, this Hairware project event, a Horizon 2020 project, which is part of the University of the Arts London research season. And this is our first sort of public airing of a project. It's a 4-year project, we're 18 months into it. And it's a really great opportunity for us to showcase to you some of this brilliant work, some of the work, the progress that we've made already, and some of the key questions that we've been asking ourselves. And it's a really special event because we're bringing together lots of different people from across the project, as well as some of our collaborators and colleagues from within and outside of University of the Arts London. So today you'll be hearing from myself, from Professor Kate Goldsworthy, Dr. Rosie Hornbuckle, and Dr. Letitia Forst. We're all the UAL Centre for Circular Design researchers working on the project. But we also have Hairware partners joining us today: Elvis Sandhu from Maybean, Jessie Marsh from TCBL, Lynn van der Schuren from Centexbel, as well as Dieter Stelmack from DITF in Germany, who's actually going to be giving us a live microfactory tour later this afternoon. We are going to be looking at bio-based materials. We're going to be looking at local. We're going to be looking at circular and collaboration. And then we're going to be having a discussion and a panel talk. So I'd really like to welcome our invited experts as well this afternoon. We have brought in some of our network who all have different expertise around these questions, around these subjects. So I'm going to ask them to come on screen and introduce themselves very quickly. I'll start by introducing Professor Adam Thorpe, as he can't be here until a little bit later this afternoon. Adam is Professor of Socially Responsive Design at Central St Martin's, University of the Arts London. He's co-director of Design Against Crime Research Centre and coordinator of the UAL DCIS Lab. His research explores participatory approaches to design for social, service, and policy innovation. He also co-designs clothing, products, and spaces in response to societal goals and challenges, with a focus on making clothes that work for city dwellers that walk and ride. So we'll be meeting Adam a little later, but now if I could call upon our next expert, Professor Veronica Capsali, if she's here. And if not, I'll go to...
Hi, can you see me?
Yes, but push your screen down a little bit.
I've been, how's that?
That's perfect.
Okay, cool. Yes, my name's I'm Veronica Capsali. I'm a professor of materials technology and design at the London College of Fashion. And my area of expertise is all around how we design with biology and learn from biology and apply lessons into our design practice. And I've had the pleasure of collaborating with Becky and Kate for several years now, so I'm delighted to be here to hear about your work.
Amazing. Thanks so much for joining us, Veronica. And Dr. Sylvia Grimaldi.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
It's great. Hi, I'm Sylvia Grimaldi. I'm a reader in service design and collaborative futures at London College of Communication, which is part of UAL as well. I'm also co-founder and co-director of the Service Futures Lab, and I've been running the Masters in Service Design at UAL for about 5 years now. And in kind of a lot of these different roles, I've been working on very large, complex projects involving different communities, different stakeholders, academics, universities, government, businesses, third sector organizations, and really focusing on kind of designing from policy to service delivery. So on the scales from kind of systems and ecosystems to really user-centered details.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. We're delighted you're with us this afternoon, Sylvia.
Thank you.
And next is Gwen Cunningham.
Yes, hope you can also hear me, see me. Gwen, lovely to be here and really looking forward to the presentations. Today, I'm the lead for the textiles program at Circle Economy. And in case you're not familiar with this, Circle Economy are an impact organization based out of Amsterdam, but working globally. And our textiles program is built around kind of two key pillars. So on one hand, we work with collectors, sorters, and recyclers to build the technology and the infrastructure and the data that you need to valorize textile waste at scale. And on the other hand, we work with brands, manufacturers, and retailers and help them to assess and adopt circular design practices, so very relevant to today, and also circular business models. And alongside the work that I do with Circular Economy, I'm also the lead for the circular economy at the National College of Art and Design in Ireland.
Amazing, Gwen, thank you so much. We're delighted you're with us as well. And last but by no means least at all is Sophie 10 Day Christians. Are you there, Sophie?
Yes, hi everybody, it's lovely to be here. I'm here today in my capacity as an external researcher for the CCD. And my research is, I'm based in between Amsterdam and the Netherlands and Zimbabwe, but my research is based in Zimbabwe. And I look at what circularity looks like outside of maybe a European context, and specifically how it looks like in Zimbabwe in the textiles and apparel industry. And kind of looking at how the language may be different and the practices, innovations and technologies are different, but by no means they make just a valuable contribution to circular economic development. So that's kind of my research area, and I'm really excited to be here today.
Oh, we're so excited to have you as well, Sophie, and for joining us in the last year to really help broaden our perspectives and our understanding of the landscape. So thank you so much. Now I'm going to hand over to Lynn, and she's the coordinator for the Hairware project.
Yes, my computer is a bit slow, but I'm here. So I will share my screen. Yeah, I hope you can all see it properly.
Very good.
Yes, okay, thank you. So thank you for having the opportunity to introduce you to the Hairware project. It's really my pleasure. So my name is Lien van der Schuren. I'm working at Textile together with my colleague Guy. I'm coordinating the Hairware project. So the goal of my introduction is to really give you a quick overview of what we are doing in the Hairware project, and then the partners will tell you much more details later on today. So first of all, some general information. So we are a project started in October 2020 and now running for about 1.5 years. And in total, we will run for 4 years. We have a project website available. So in case you would be interested to have some more information on our project, you can have a look to the website as well. So first of all, let's give a general overview of what the goal of the Hairware project is. So here in this figure, you see on the left side how the clothing industry is being organized, mostly still at this moment. You have, for example, the production of the raw materials in Middle East. Then we have the production, the making of the garments in Asia. And once they're made, they finally come to Europe. After their end of life, we still see a lot of incineration and landfilling, hereby also having these microfibers released into the environment. So as you can imagine, not at all a sustainable way of working with our clothing. So that's why we want to propose an alternative and also support with the Hairware project to go to a more sustainable clothing industry. And how do we want to do this? First of all, we want to get rid of the linear economy and we want to go to a circular value chain. That's why we see all these circles into Europe. We also believe that if you want to go to a circular clothing industry, you will need to work locally. And that's why we have these different circular hubs spread over Europe. Also, we want to get rid of the fossil-based materials, and that's why we try to work with bio-based materials, if possible, also locally sourced. So this is a general overview of the Hairware project. So in a nutshell, what we want to do, have a clothing industry which is more sustainable, based on 3 pillars: circularity, bio-based materials, and local working. And I'll just give a bit more detail on each of them, and more will come then later today. So for the circularity, what are the topics we are working on in the Hairware project? It's the creation of circular design guidelines, which are also suited for bio-based materials. In here, we also focus on having an optimized use, reuse, and repair of the clothing. We also understand that it can be quite difficult for brands and for designers to know how they can design in a proper way. So that's why we are trying to support them by developing software tools and also by having some labels, proving the circularity and giving more information on the materials and what they are made from. And as a last, if we want to have a circular, a closed way of working, we also want to avoid unintended releases. So that's why we also focus on the minimization of the microfibers going into the environment. Going then to the second pillar, which is on the bio-based. Here, the main goal is actually to replace the currently most often used materials used in the clothing industry. These are at the moment cotton and polyester. For the cotton, we want to use cellulose made from bio-based sources. Here we look, for example, to straw, to manure, to seaweeds, and make cellulose yarns out of them. The fossil-based polyester we want to replace by biopolyesters, where we look to get the properties of these biopolyesters suitable to be used in clothing applications. As a last, also all the subsequent steps like coating, printing, dyeing, also these are being developed to be bio-based. And then we have the last pillar, which is on the local aspect. And here we actually want to produce our clothing via a network manufacturing, where we bring people together which can make our clothing from fiber to a garment. As I mentioned already, if you have to work locally, you will also work automatically at a smaller scale. And that's why we believe the micro factories will be really important in this. And as you can imagine, if we want to do this, we really need also actors present in this value chain and willing to make this change. And that's why one of the important topics is also to build this community of like-minded actors. And then here you see the value chain that we want to build within the HEREWEAR project, where we start from biomaterials, we make yarns and fabrics out of them, and finally we produce the garments in a circular designed way. Here, for the end of life, we look to repair, and also to the recycling, we try to help, for example, with the labeling. As you can imagine, you see many different steps which have to be taken. So that's why we are working together with a really nice consortium of motivated partners who are supporting this transition and who are working to get the HEREWEAR project to a success. And we at Textile are the coordinator of this project. And then just to end my talk, I will give a short explanation why Textile is actually acting as a coordinator of the HEREWEAR project. So for those who do not know us, we are a collective research and technical center located in Belgium. Our activities are on the one hand on testing of textiles and plastics, but also a lot on R&D on these materials. And if we then look to what's important to us when we are doing our research, I would say the first one is that we try to work closely with the industry. That's of course also something we are doing in the HEREWEAR project. And then sustainability is really important to us, which we try to tackle via different ways, but you see circularity, using of recycled materials, and the use of biopolymers are two important ones, which we are also working on in the HEREWEAR project. And then this is the end of my short introduction to the HEREWEAR project. Thanks a lot for giving the opportunity, and also thanks to all the partners who are cooperating with us.
Great, Lynn, thank you so much. So we are going to start the afternoon's proceedings now, which is very exciting. We've been working behind the scenes, making a series of films for you. So always trying to minimize the chance of technology going wrong. We thought what we would do is make a series of films, show them to you, take questions from you during the films via Menti. And then address those questions at the end of each section. But also you'll be able to roll your questions forward into the panel, the Q&A at the end. The session at the end, we're going to bring everybody onto the stage, as it were, and we're going to ask our sort of experts, our outside experts, our external experts, to just give a little reflective commentary on the research that they've seen, maybe pose a provocation, maybe they pose a question. And then we've got about 15 to 20 minutes at the end of the event to look at those together. So we're going to do the first section right now, and it's bio-based. On the screen, I just want to point this out to you. I don't know if you will have used Menti before, but you can hold your iPhone camera up to this QR code, and it will take you through to where we're collecting the questions. You can also, if you're on a laptop and you don't have the ability to use that QR code, you can just go to menti.com and enter the code that's on the screen. Please make a note of it, because this slide will be going down in just a second. But we are also tracking the chat box, so you can put your question. If Menti's just not working for you this afternoon, don't worry, we are going to be tracking things via the chat as well. In Menti, there is an opportunity to upvote the questions. So if you can, open it, keep it open as a screen, watch the questions come in from everybody else in the audience, and then click the ones that you would like to get answered. So we can then see a consensus around the kind of questions that are most pertinent to the audience this afternoon. Okay, so let's go into our first session. We're going to be seeing two videos, the first by Dr. Letitia Forst from Centre for Circular Design. And after that, we're going to be exploring the idea of bio with Brecht from Textile. So Letitia, would you like to, the videos will play back to back, and then Letitia will come on for the Q&A.
Hi. This presentation is to introduce how the Hairware team are investigating the field of bio-based textiles for a circular, local and systemic approach to material innovation. So bio-based materials are really showing great potential in a shift away from fossil-based resources and away from some of the polluting effects of widespread conventional textiles. But however, we must notice that not all bio-based fibres are equal. And it's a really important first step to review the state of the art in this area so that we can better understand and articulate the potential of the Hairware fibres in this area. So what are bio-based materials, and how can we take on this opportunity in design so that we can develop circular and local economies that will potentially offer reduced environmental impacts for fashion? So we can look at this really fantastic report that was released in early 2021 by Biofabricate and Fashion for Good, which is called Understanding Biomaterial Innovation. And it shows us how the different terms that are used to describe materials really overlap and often sort of lack focus in what they're actually defining. So you can see here that biomaterial actually encompasses pretty much anything. We can then sort of like go into some more refined criteria around like biofabrication, biosynthetics, which we'll get to in a minute. But really, based on this definition, a bio-based material can be pretty much anything that includes 50% of a resource that comes from biomass. So for example, a 50-50 poly-cotton mix will be included in this description of bio-based. So it's been really key to the Hairware project that disciplines should be working collaboratively towards this systemic innovation for bio-based materials and to refining what we mean by bio-based, what this can actually mean for design, for innovation. So we've put this quite strongly forward in the design-led approach that's been taken to understanding this category of materials. The idea here is really as much to understand the material as it is to understand their potential and challenges for fashion and clothing design. So we're bringing together the investigation of the field of bio-based materials close to the lived experience of sourcing and using textiles for fashion and clothing. So our scoping at the beginning of the project was carried out by gathering a collection of samples which really represent different examples of what bio-based materials can look and feel like. This presentation therefore focuses on what we learned from collecting approximately 80 bio-based material samples in the first few months of the HEREWEAR project, and how they were then used to map the terrain for the project. So one thing that was included in this category of bio-based materials, even though we left aside the materials that involved quite a large part of synthetic materials like that polycotton I was just talking about, we still have quite a lot of these conventional bio-based materials. And those are all the materials in which the fibre is present in its fibre form in nature. And some of these materials will offer benchmarks for quality and to show us what we might aim to achieve through our material innovation. So while they offer plenty of exciting qualities, that's not really where HEREWEAR is looking. Where HEREWEAR is looking, and the focus of the project, is on biosynthetic materials, which use the biomass available in nature, but which is not readily available in the form of a fibre. Therefore, we need to transform it into an engineered fibre with the opportunities that that might come with. So this might include cellulose from agricultural waste, or PLA from sugarcane or corn, for example. And the sample collection really shows a range of possible textile applications for these types of materials. The sample collection also allowed us to really better understand how available the material was, simply by just engaging with the material providers to secure a sample. It's often a challenge for designers who want to use innovative bio-based materials that some very exciting and highly mediatized materials are sometimes just beyond the horizon for them. It's therefore quite useful to define what materials are available now, which ones might be on the market in the next few months or years, or even already are, but are too expensive or too niche right now for some designers to use them. And then see what our far materials are. What are those materials that we want to start thinking of when we are imagining the future of fashion today? Bringing together the sample collection really helps us to tell material stories in this tangible way, like this example of a live mapping by feedstock origin. So here we have the actual samples on a table with the labels of where they come from, what is the raw material that they are made of, and it really helps us debunk some myths and better understand the variety of this category of materials. And really holding the samples in one's hand, as much as it's been quite difficult over the pandemic, this can really provide invaluable insights for designers who want to use these resources so that they can understand their roles and the challenges for future collections. Of course, each category holds multiple layers, but this classification starts building a picture of what is included and what is exciting when we're looking at these bio-based materials. So let's look through some examples of samples that are part of the HEREWEAR collection based on the feedstock they come from. For example, biosynthetic materials can use biomass from trees, like the lyocell and the viscose that we all know so well. So alternatively, the biomass for biosynthetics can be extracted from crops. So here we include materials from sugarcane or corn, like the Sorona faux fur shown here, or from castor oil, like the bio-based nylon produced by Flying Tex. It's important to note that bio-based materials are absolutely not necessarily biodegradable. This is the case, for example, for this bio-based nylon, which is mainly offered as a way to reduce the use of fossil-based materials to make synthetic fibres. And we'll hear a lot more about that in a few minutes. It starts getting really interesting in terms of environmental impact reduction when this biomass can be extracted from agricultural waste. So this is the case, for example, with iruni, the iruni fibre that you can see on the left here, which uses waste from the flaxseed industry, so the production of flaxseed for food, and recovers the unused parts of that production to make a regenerated cellulose fibre. The key here is to divert this biomass from incineration, producing new fibres without entering into competition for land with the production of food. Moving off land can also reduce the tension with the need to feed ourselves. So using algae for the biomass in fibres can really help achieve this, for example. Algae knits is an example of such a fibre. So here we might want to draw a distinction between fibres which use small amount of algae as part of a fibre for its health properties, like C-cell, and a fibre which uses the cellulose in the algae to make textile fibres themselves. Finally, we can consider how the raw materials for biosynthetic fibres can be extracted from waste textiles themselves. This points to a potential circular route for biobased textiles. As examples, Iron Cell F shows us how cellulose for a regenerated fibre can be extracted from cotton-rich waste. Or again, Eastman's Naya Renew fibre uses waste polyester from textiles or even from packaging waste as a base compound for the production of a cellulose acetate fibre. The sample collection really showed us how to draw parallels and distinctions between different types of fibres and textiles in the field of bio-based materials. So this goes beyond the feedstock and the life cycle map that we're seeing here. Really shows an overview of all the possible processes that are available for the treatment and the design phases of bio-based textiles. This really helps us better understand how different materials are really distinct and how they might best be used in different applications, and how we can design products and systems that really support this local fashion world. So this really shows us how, like, starting off with the feedstocks that we might have been seeing in the examples just before, different processes might be available, different types of applications will be more relevant, and really shows us how we can understand different types of materials in relation to each other. Understanding these material properties supports us in defining better choices for the design of products in these fashion systems, allocating the right resource, the right treatment, and the right end of life to the right product, so that we can define these circular, local and bio-based fashion and textile systems. Thank you for listening.
Hello, today I will give you a presentation on what bio-based means in the context of HEREWEAR. Maybe I'll start with a small introduction about myself. I work at Textile, which is a textile research center in Belgium. I worked before on second generation biofuels, and I'm nowadays responsible for coatings, printing inks, bio-based formulations and building blocks for the textile sector. So I'll start with a few basic terms that are often used and which may be confusing to give you an idea on what it is. Natural means it occurs in nature. I give you a whole lot of polymers you might know that occur in nature, and it means they just occur just like that in nature, but it is important to realize that they can occur in very complex natural compositions. For example, wood, the schematic picture that is shown here, is a mixture of 3 polymers. If you then buy paper, which is made of cellulose, it means they removed lignin, they removed hemicellulose, they also made a pulp, they refined this pulp, etc. So many chemical steps are needed to make a natural product. And in this case, it means that also a natural product has a CO2 impact. Also, fossil oils have been used to process wood into paper. This is very important for all biopolymers and all natural polymers occurring. Then you have synthetic polymers, and this means it's man-made. And here you see the image of where a fossil oil is used to do steam cracking into a building block for polymers, which is then used in the polymerization of polyethylene. Polyethylene is a simple plastic bag as we know it, so this is a synthetic polymer, a plastic. It is important to notice that synthetic can also be bio-based. You can make this exact same plastic derived from ethanol, so derived from sugars that are fermented into ethanol. You can also make the same plastic bag, which will not be biodegradable. So it's not because it's bio-based that it cannot be synthetic, and it is not because it is bio-based that it is biodegradable, because in this case it is not. Also, natural does not mean it is better than synthetic. The example here, cotton, a natural fiber, uses a lot of water, pesticides, herbicides, etc. It's also a lot of social impact, and therefore is in fact not a very good fiber to use in textiles. You also have regenerated cellulose, which is a synthetic fiber, where you have cellulose that is dissolved, chemical steps are done, a spinning is done to get a fiber of regenerated cellulose, also known as viscose or rayon. And there you obviously have attention points. And here where we look at sourcing cellulose from low impact sources, but also we look at the technology, the chemical steps used to be as environmentally friendly as possible. Now back to the terms. What is a bioplastic? In fact, what is that bio? Bio is a word which can be very confusing. And I just give you here the explanation for some of these words. Biobased means it is based on recently captured carbon derived from photosynthesis. Biodegradable is something very different. It means it is a degradable polymer in a defined setting in a reasonable time frame, so quite short time frame, with degradation into CO2. In many cases, it does not have to be biobased. There are polymers derived from fossil oils that are biodegradable. Then you have another word, biocompatible, and many other words exist as well. But biocompatible, for example, can be medical titanium HIP, let's say, which has nothing to do with biobased, nothing to do with biodegradable, but is compatible with the human body, and then you can call it biocompatible. So bio, in fact, is a very, very confusing term and should be used in. Then we go towards bioplastics, often used in textiles, and then you can classify them in 3 classes. Those which are bio-based and non-biodegradable, those which are bio-based and biodegradable, and also those which are non-bio-based and biodegradable. So again, here, the 2 terms, bio-based, biodegradable, are definitely not the same, so they should not be confused. A very important note on lettering. It's not because something is biodegradable that it should be an excuse for lettering. Also, a logo for biodegradability you can only find on products which are meant to use in such an environment. For example, soil biodegradability on mulching films in agricultural setting, you can have such a logo. On a textile, on a t-shirt, you should never find back a logo biodegradability because the consumer may think it is fine to throw it on a compost pile, which it never is. It should be recycled, reused, or disposed of properly, but not littered in the environment. Then we go to the next part of the presentation, and that's about what is the source of the bio-based textile, and that they call the. So the typical feedstocks used are sugars, lipids, and proteins, much like we eat, and also in competition with the food chain. I put here a few examples, but there are in fact many varieties of these 3 major sources. If you then have a look at what you do with a feedstock, in order to get a biopolymer, you need many different steps. This is processing steps, fermentation steps, etc. And all these steps require energy again. This energy, even though you have a bio-based product, is very likely to be from fossil sources. So it's not because your polymer is bio-based that there was no need for oil making such a polymer. So it is important to notice that the more steps, the more processing you need, the less environmentally friendly your product is. Also, it is better for each of these steps to be using fermentation techniques or white biotechnology rather than hazardous solvents, reagents, catalysts, reactors at high temperatures, etc. And this is a second very important remark I want to make. The first generation feedstock have a very big impact on the planet. This is a picture that I took from the documentary A Life on Our Planet from David Attenborough, which is on Netflix, about how we use the world to have sufficient food or also materials, biofuels, to sustain our way of living. And it shows you very nicely how this is detrimental to the biodiversity on the world. So here you see again an image of Borneo from the 1950s to 2020, and you see the deforestation. So Borneo is an island twice the size of Germany, and you see the massive deforestation just for agricultural purposes and the devastating effects it has on the planet, in fact. So therefore, there is a need for next generation feedstocks, and there is an evolution in there. So the first generation are crops like sugarcane, palm oil, rapeseed oil, etc. The second generation is a lot of lignocellulosic biomass, which is now treated a lot as waste. Or the third generation is marine biomass. And this is really where at HEREWEAR we also try to look at having these raw materials with a lower impact on the planet. Then I quickly go to end with over a few bioplastics which are often used in textiles. If you have a look to the textile fibers used, about half of them are polyester fibers. Then there's a small section of polyamide fibers and a very big part of cotton fibers. So the way to go to have a lower impact on the planet is, for example, going from cotton to regenerated cellulose, which has also an impact, but a lower impact. And also looking at alternatives, better alternatives for PET. For example, a biopet, which may be 30% bio-based already, polylactic acid, a PEF, or of course also recycled polyester fibers are very nice to use as they have a much lower impact on the planet. So one fiber is regenerated cellulose, which comes from usually forestry. In Europe, this will be from trees. In China, this will be from bamboo. Make sure you source it from sustainably forested sources. So look at the label for a sustainable product. Then you have bio-based polyamide, which comes from an oil from these plants, which grows in very arid environments. Then you have bio-based PET, which comes 30% bio-based, 70% still derived from fossil sources. Then polylactic acid and PEF, which come from either starch from maize when it's produced in the US, or sugarcane when it's produced in Thailand in this case. And then the last one is polyhydroxyalkanoate, a new polymer, which is a bacterial polymer, so it is made within bacteria in certain conditions, which is also a thermoplastic polymer, which in HEREWEAR we also use for printing inks. And this is where I want to end, and thank you for your attention.
That was our two first videos looking at bio-based materials. So thank you so much to everyone for having put some great questions into the Mentimeter. So I'll pick a couple and answer them directly. As you can see, like I was the presenter of the first video, I just changed. So the questions that really come through here are around what the challenges for biomaterials might be for them to be widely used by designers. And I think this ties in really closely to another question, which is around how do we simplify bio for people? Or another question that relates to very closely to that, which is, would it help to be more specific about bio-based? For example, we could be bio-based organic, bio-based waste, bio-based recycle, and more options can be like different regarding the sustainability impacts. And I think that really sort of like points to a very important sort of aspect that was brought up through the presentation looking at the sample collection, but also the presentation looking like a bit more into the science of these materials. It is that, as with a lot of things around circular economy and sustainability, it is really complicated and it really depends. Some of the work that we're doing as part of the HEREWEAR project is really looking at this communication around materials, understanding the difference between a very relevant and perhaps extremely sustainable conventional bio-based material, for example, and the opportunities for regenerated fibers, these biosynthetic materials. We know that this is a place where there is already a lot of miscommunication. I think a lot of us are aware of the issues around bamboo viscose and how that can be very misleading both to designers and to users. And this is really something that we're addressing in the project by working with designers, working with users. And I won't go into too much detail about this because it will be the key component of some of the presentations we'll be hearing later, but developing guidelines and tools to help designers understand these materials, understand how to select them, what they might mean in terms of a full life cycle, how they might relate to life cycle assessment, and also what design decisions might need to go hand in hand with the selection of these materials. So I hope that answers the question, and you will have the opportunity to ask questions for each of the segments of this event. So please continue using Mentimeter all the way through. And to answer another question that was asked in Mentimeter, this presentation is being recorded, and we'll let you know how it's being made available, whether it's through the Hairware platform, which you'll be hearing a lot more about in the following presentations, or through other channels. So with this, I will move on to our next segment. So we will be looking at local. So as you heard, Hairware is all about bio-based, local and circular. And with our section on local, we will have first a presentation by Jessie Marsh, which I'll press play on in a minute. And then we'll go into a live presentation after that. So bear with me whilst I share Jessie's presentation. Off we go.
Good afternoon. This is Jessie Marsh of SEDEX TCBL, and I'll be talking about local production systems in Hairware. SEDEX TCBL represents the TCBL network. TCBL stands for Textile and Clothing Business Labs. And in fact, the core of the network is over 50 labs across Europe that are working on some form of innovation in the industry. The network also brings together over 250 companies that want to be in contact with what's happening in the labs and want to work together to experiment new business models for sustainable fashion. Now, the fashion industry is organized, like most industries, in what is called a supply chain. And that's the sequence of companies, each of which takes care of one step in the production process. So you have those that process cotton, wool, silk, or whatever. You have those that weave or knit to make fabrics. You have those that design collections. You have those that assemble garments to make the finished product. And then you have those that distribute into stores and sell to the end customer. Now, in the circular economy model, rather than a linear supply chain, we try to close the loop so that the end product from the consumer's hands goes back into the production process. That can happen, for instance, by recycling the fabric, or it could happen also by repairing a pair of old jeans. Traditionally, production was organized in local industrial districts where the different companies that are part of the supply chain can work in proximity with each other. That facilitates the specifications, it facilitates collaboration, it facilitates the exchange of knowledge, and in general can facilitate the innovation process within these local districts. Here you see the example of Italy, and textile and clothing are the districts in light blue. The global fashion system has instead broken these local systems, shipping things back and forth around the planet in the search for where the next step can be done more cheaply. Now, as there is growing awareness of the disastrous social and environmental impacts of this system, not just for the transportation of the goods, but also because how the processes are carried out at the different steps. That's why the Hairware vision wants to see a return to local production networks using bio-based fibers, using circular design principles, but above all, bringing back the connection between the different steps of the supply chain at the local level. In order to get there, we are trying to build a community of all of the stakeholders, the different type of stakeholders who are part of the system, clustering them according to their different areas of interest. We're working with 3 exemplary local partnerships to test out the local concept. One in Iași, Romania, is focused on garment production. One near Naples in Italy focuses on biomaterials and works directly with farmers in the surrounding area. And one in Antwerp in Belgium is focused on the circular design, wants to be the capital of circular fashion. These partnerships include public authorities, research centers, local companies, and citizens and NGOs, and are working together to test out the local production model. We also have in HEREWEAR the online community, where anyone from anywhere can register, sign up through the sign up survey, where we can find out what kind of aspects of the HEREWEAR project you're interested in. And in here, in this community space, you can see what's going on in the research in the project and keep up to date with the latest developments. So sign up to the HEREWEAR community if you're interested in knowing more, and or if you would like to become part of a local experiment in local production in your area. Thank you very much for your attention, and goodbye.
Great. Thanks for that presentation, Jesse. Now we are going to our live presentation. So over to Dieter, who is going to be showing us around the microfactory at DITF. Hello, Dieter.
Becky, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, great. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to present our microfactory. Before maybe even having a short walk around, you may recognize from the background that we are exactly in our let's say, research factory or a living lab. I want also to give you some information in form of a presentation. Now let me please switch on my presentation. Okay, looks fine. So my name is Dieter. I'm working since a couple of years, maybe even some decades, in the field of textile supply chain, now the transformation to the circular economy. We are located here in Denkendorf, which is nearby Stuttgart in the southern part of Germany. And we do a lot, or maybe even all the things in the textile chain, from molecule, from polymerization, from filament making to yarn making to fabric making, and also to garment and functionalized garments. And we also do a lot of the things in the digitization. We developed a model for all the processes in the textile chain and circle, and we also focus to CO2 and other sustainability aspects. This is just to give you a very short overview what we are doing here in Denkendorf in total, and what I am doing in particular in this field of digitization. What is a microfactory? What is the core concept of the microfactory? The core is first an integrated information flow, as much as possible automated from the, here it is indicated from the design, from the CAD, over digital textile printing, cutting, assembling, and to the final product. And this is, let's say, the core that we have. Something when we decided that we have designed a very good tool, a very good garment that we can process and produce it automatically. And this this information flow also covers the aspects of the calculation of the machine setting and the machine instructions for the printing, for the cutting. And in this context, it is also very important that the color reliability is on a very high level. From a more conceptual point of view, we can say, okay, a microfactory is a manufacturing setup with a set of textile and clothing production equipment. And as I said, the information flow, starting from body scan in our case, over these different steps to the final product. And by this, if we have an integrated flow, it is more or less very easy to adapt to different product types, to different material types, maybe even to different processes, to different settings, and also to different production dimensions. From a systemic point of view, it can be considered as a black box. No, not a black box, a production box, let's say. We put in some fabrics in some cases, and we put in some CAD requirements or CAD drawings, and the output will be a finished garment. And one of the core characteristics is that microfactories typically can be scaled up by replication and networking. It can be also scaled up by implementing, let's say, more machinery of a higher capacity, but typically it is scaled up by replication. This brings me what we have done here in Denkendorf in our research since the last, let's say, even 10 years. On the left side, it starts with a body scan. And I will show, we can just have it here on the left side from my point of view, from the back side. We have a CAD station, 3D CAD, and also animation. The core, the backbone, or the connection between the virtual world, between the CAD and design on the one side, and then going to the physical element, to the physical production, which you see on the bottom, which is printing, cutting, handling, and assembly. The core is to calculate a good or a perfect settings for the printing in this case, and also for the cutting. And this has to be done with respect to all the color requirements. And additionally, we have implemented some HR and not HR, sorry. We have implemented some VR and some AR technologies in order to make the, let's say, the designed garments more lively for the presentation mode, for the marketing and for the consumer even, but also for the decision about design or to put it into the collection and production. Sounds very easy, and for sure I go not into detail about this slide, but you can imagine that the IT behind what I have shown you is not as simple as it might appear. Here you can see an excerpt from a detailed service workflow, what we have implemented or what has to be implemented when implementing or when using or setting up a digital textile microfactory. It looks complicated, but it is very structured, and if we follow this structure, it is not so complicated to implement it. Some impressions, how we have done it for exhibitions. Here you can see that just let me switch on my marker here. I have to. What we have shown 2 years ago at a fair here in Stuttgart, we have set up a complete digital textile microfactory, which was controlled by us or managed and organized by DITF, and we do it with all the partners together. We do it with HP for printing, for example, or with Epson or with Roland. We are very flexible regarding the printer. We have the color and the rib. The coloring is made by Cadon, and we have the rib by Ergosoft, for example. We have sewing machines, in this case from Juki. Digital printing, I mentioned already, and the 3D design is provided by Human Solutions software. So, and here you can see again or identify again the flow from 3D design, in this case also a virtual reality presentation, the color management, which I mentioned, which is a very important thing, to digital printing. Here you may even recognize that we do not do a full printing on the full dimension of the fabric, but we print into the markers. And this is also a special setting here, that we calculate the markers before and we print only those areas which are really needed. In this case, we make a transfer printing, we go to heat setting, then we go to the single ply cutter, which is shown here. And then the confection is still done more or less on the conventional way, because automation is still a research and innovation topic. As I said, the information flow is done automatically. The material flow in this case is done manually, even if we doing currently a lot of research and innovation in also automating the material flow. Let's say another story is what we have shown in the fair, at the tech process fair. There's a video behind it. Let me try to start it. I'm not quite sure if it works. Yeah, okay. At least you can see it running. Unfortunately, there's no sound, or I could not activate the sound. But there was also a full setup from the design. You can have some impressions, the design, the printing in this case of logos, for example. Printing of in this case, it is also thicker material. There it's the grasping and the transport, the automatic grasping and transport with HEVs, and then to the sewing, as I said, the sewing which is still done automatically. Extended by some VR possibilities, and here you see, let's say, the same or similar processes, again for printing, for cutting, and for sewing. In complementary, we do this also for the upper parts of the shoe, knitted parts, and also in this case, we start directly from the scan. We can automatically translate it into the product dimensions. We can translate it into the processing dimensions. We can adjust, or we can instruct, in this case, the knitting machine, though also there is implemented a fully automated information flow from scan to production to the upper part of the, in this case, of a shoe, of the knitted part of a shoe. You may have recognized that I'm currently just in our digital microfactory. We use it as a research factory where we implement and where we test a lot of technologies and integration components. You will see here also all the commercial partners, not only commercial, but also academic partners, with whom we are collaborating. And just to show you, okay. I will just try to walk around a little bit. Let me.
You need to stop sharing your screen.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. So I try to adjust the zoom a little bit, that you can have a look here. On the left side here, to adjust a little bit. Let me try. Yeah. So a little bit, you may recognize this box here, where is the body scanner in behind. The CAD station is over there. Unfortunately, I cannot bring it here into the video look. Then we start with the fabrics, which are typically coming from on the roads here. You see, you may recognize that we experiment with different fabric types here, different colors and fabric dimensions as well. Digital printing is not installed here in this room. We are just changing. We just got a brand new small digital printer for sampling. But let's say our typical printer is in another laboratory in the next building over there. But this also, let's say, is helpful for checking the automated information flow, even if the equipment is not in one room or in one laboratory. Then I mentioned already, important is the color setting. So the color profiling, we do it with test printing and with all the, let's say, the color profiling equipment. The next from the printing is a cutting, single ply cutter. You can see here in the background. Unfortunately, I cannot operate it, but you may also recognize that we print into the markers, and it's not precisely seen, but here are some, for example, some black circles which indicate the reference points when coming to the cutting. After the cutting, we today still take the fabric pieces manually, and we process it to the sewing part, which is shown here or which is performed here. Sewing is not in, let's say, the sewing technology and the sewing principles are not in the core focus in this all research development. We just take what is existing, but of course there are great improvements. And we will take care about this and discuss it also with the machinery provider. So a short walk around here. We have sufficient of space and sufficient of ideas to improve it. Now let me come to the last 2, 4, 5 minutes. I will share my screen again. Not moving. Why not? Strange. Okay. As I said, the printer is in another office, and here you may recognize what are, let's say, the challenges when printing into the marker. We have to calculate some spare millimeters, we have to calculate the sewing part and so on. This is very, very, let's say, also IT intensive and algorithm intensive. Just to show you also about the cutter, with how it runs. Check. To some extent, it is not running. There's a video behind it, but last test. No, sorry. Some technical issues. I don't know why the video is not running. Of course, during the tests we did before, it went very well, but that's typically, I think. Okay. Coming to the more global view of the microfactory. You have seen the technology, what we have installed. You may have got an indication of the IT, what is behind, what is necessary. And in order to, let's say, to implement it and to give some decision support also for potential implementation, we made analysis of the material flow. We are using a standardized method, which is called MFCA. I do not go into details here, just two elements in this material flow. We start not from the material, we start from the CAD and the color management. We end at the confection, and we indicate what is necessary for one product in terms of material and in terms of material also. Yeah, in terms of material, you may recognize that the biggest error is here, the biggest blue one. This means we need 1.18 square meters for 1 unit of a textile product of a shirt. In the same way, with the same method, with the same model, we calculate the costs. And you may recognize that the costs are here some 30 euro, which is quite a lot. This is because it is an individualized product. This is because we need, in this case, €3.53 for the fabric, and we need €5, around €6 for the sewing. Okay, this is just an example. Yeah? And in a similar way, we can also calculate the CO2 emissions. What is the load of a polo shirt? In this case, you may read it. And also you may recognize that the input here is around 3 kilograms coming from the fabric. This should give you some ideas what is about material flow, what is about the cost, and what is about sustainability aspects. And for all these settings and potential configurations, we can imagine a set of different application scenarios. We can use it as a factory in a shop, which is even a very challenging setup. We can use it as a standalone factory with limited or let's say low capacities or with upscaled capacities. We can use it as a factory in a factory, maybe also maybe only for sampling, for example, and we can implement it like partly we did it here in a technological center or in a lab. These are some ideas how a digital textile microfactory could be implemented. Now coming a little bit to also the link to the HEREWEAR project. And first of all, the idea in the HEREWEAR project is to use this concept of the microfactory and for the networking and for the upscaling. We did not really start with this initiative to configure the microfactory or decentralized or local. But what we did, we started already with some initial experiments, and I would like to show it in a moment in life. Oh, sorry, I have to change. We made an early prototype within the major, let's say, within partners or by partners of HEREWEAR. Design and pattern has been made by Vetena and Malbine, who is also in the conference today. The PLA has been made by Centex Bell. Fabric has been made by Eurocut in Barcelona. Garment has been done by Midville companies, and coordination has been done by us. So that's for the early prototype, and now I stop my presentation, but I still want to show you some samples for 1-2 minutes. First of all, it is not easy to recognize what we have made, and it is, yeah, maybe not a very attractive one, but it is an experiment, yeah, and of course it has to be upscaled in all types of dimensions, from this dimension here and also from the production dimension. Other samples you may see here. Sorry. What we have done in the microfactory, For example, these are some gloves made with Gore-Tex Infinium fabrics. We have made some small bags and pockets like this here, which has been done, which also printed and cut it on these machines. Another t-shirt or another polo shirt has been designed, completely designed in a microfactory, just like this here. So these are examples, and I would like to finish with this one here. Also a polo shirt, which we have made at one of the exhibitions and partly here. And let's say my question now to maybe to the audience is, if you got it, what I explained to you, what is the weight of this polo shirt? Oh, okay, might be some 200 grams, 300 grams. I don't know precisely. We can put it on a weight. And the corresponding question now is, what is the weight of CO2? And if you have read very carefully the slides, you may remember that there should be some 2 point blah, blah, blah kilograms. And it is also printed here. That's it. Thank you for your attention.
Oh, I need to clap for you, Peter. Well done. That's
Thank
so
you.
Brilliant. That's so fantastic. I mean, the thing about the project is that we've never sort of visited each other's, offices, factories, studios, premises. So being able to do this with you in this session is great. We've been talking for 18 months or more, and to finally see it is fantastic. We've got a few minutes to take the questions. There are some questions I can see that are going to be so good for you to answer in the panel part at the end. So I'm going to quickly go through the questions that have got upvoted to talk about. And with 4 votes, what does working in local systems mean for design? What needs to change compared to the way small and larger businesses work now? So I'll have a very quick go at answering this from a design perspective. Local in the project means both the user interacting with the product locally. So I think this comes up in another question, very much about extended use behaviors, as we know, and we're going to hear a bit more about that from Elvis a bit later. So local is about what people can do, but it's also about the production, and that's what we've just been seeing with Dieter. And it's also about the raw materials, isn't it? So it's basically, sorry, I'm disappearing, I can see, there we go. Using the bio-based waste, the agricultural waste locally. So designers have got to be aware of this waste. They've got to be aware of the material flow, select those kinds of materials and feed them into these processes. The digital micro factory can give us new technology to work with, greater efficiencies. We're being able to track the LCA. So designers can work with information, new information, respond to it, work differently, and that will change the way that they're designing. That will make their design decision-making different. They're working at different scales. So this is going to be smaller scale production, but it's much more flexible, it's much more adaptable. And, in times of pandemic, crisis, supply chain crashes, as we've seen, this is going to be really, really important. And I think this is one of the reasons why the EU is investing in this kind of networked digital manufacturing. And that's another thing, it's that digital element that connects everything up. We're able to make decisions as part of a sort of a connected process. And again, that really changes what designers need to be thinking about. So the kinds of products we're going to make, go on, Dieter.
May I add something, as we also discussed it during our last meetings? I think it is also important that designers and producers and material providers and maybe even consumers come together. Yeah? Not only digitally, but also, let's say, physically. And if we have a real environment, let's say a real production environment, this brings much more creativity on the one side, but also reflects and brings in what is is feasible, what is really doing. Because if I'm doing my design just in my, let's say, in my room, and I do not know or do not have, let's say, these things here, not just behind me, this is a different way of designing. And this opens to me some new design spaces and also brings in, let's say, some potential, even limitations for the design.
Yes, very much so, and really good, because one of the team, Rosie, she looks at proximity and how important that is for circularity. So we'll talk a little bit about that later. But yes, for circularity to work, we know we've got to connect people up. We've got to make the flows, make the gaps in the flows work better. So, and employing people differently. So actually, we've got the potential of sort of redesigning our labour, our workforce, and that relates to other projects that some of us are looking at in terms of gender equity. And so I think this is a really exciting space. And thank you for showing us, Dieter. Don't go away. We've got you on the panel coming back later, but we are now going to take a break. There were some great questions from that session, so we will come back. I really want to highlight the questions about maybe DITF rolling out into other countries. We've got a Zimbabwean designer on the panel, and she's already writing about the lack of technology investment, for her and for her economy. So it'd be great to talk about the potential for these models to roll out. And also questions coming about inclusivity, joining into the network, joining in the activities. So I won't forget those questions, we will address them. But for now, I'd like to invite everybody to take a comfort break. Don't go away. Come back for 3:30 when we will go into the next session, which is going to be circular and circular design. See you then.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back after the break. So we're now going to be diving into our next section of the event, which is looking at circular. So you know the drill now. We'll have some recorded presentations that will be running back to back, and you'll get a sense through those of how the different partners in Hairware are approaching circularity in terms of design, in terms of life cycle assessment, and how we're using these tools to help designers and innovators use bio-based materials in more circular ways. So you can continue using the Menti and put some great questions in there whilst the presentations are running. And we'll have we'll look at the answer to those questions when the three presentations are done. So coming up here, we'll first have a presentation by Professor Becky Early, followed by a presentation by Jonna Häggblom from Circular Fashion, and then a presentation that is joint between Professor Kate Goldsworthy and Jutta Herbogram by looking at the LCA and design together. So here we go.
Hi, I'm Professor Becky Early. I'm work package leader for the design work package 1 in the Hairware project. And I'm going to be talking for the next few minutes about from sustainable to circular fashion textile design and bio-based materials. So first of all, why is design important? Why have we got a design work package in the Hairware project? It's really about understanding just all the decisions that can be made at the front end of an innovation process. By the time we've made the product and we're able to measure it, it's too late. The decisions have been made. So bringing designers in at the strategy and concept point is really important. This statistic of 80% of decisions, 80% of impacts coming from the design phase is a hotly disputed idea now, but because it really varies in terms of the scale of the company that designers work in. So in really small companies, their decisions have a huge impact on the product. In larger companies, then those decisions are spread over several different departments. And so maybe it's more like 50%. But even so, what we know is that it's really important that designers are working to guidelines and making decisions based on sustainability and circularity and social inclusion and benefits. And so we need new kinds of guidelines. We need to think differently about design. Design is changing anyway. It has changed from being focused on looking at the environmental impact, the materials, to now what we're calling societal transformation and supporting social equity. It's really about making sure that the design decisions we take are going to be improving people's lives as well as the environmental performance. And that means just becoming different designers, thinking differently about design and understanding design from really different points of views. So it's an exciting time to be working in design in a project like this, where we can really push the decisions of designers towards benefiting a much, much broader group of stakeholders. We've been working with sustainable design for many years. You may know the 10. And these sort of work at product level, but also they were also designed to include systems and society and culture and sort of politics, really. So a much broader sort of set of ideas than simply to make a product more sustainable. And what we found is that we can incorporate sustainable design into circular design. In fact, it's really, really important that we do. So we're still working towards minimizing waste. We're still looking at the chemical impacts, the water and the energy use, and looking at how technology can help us, how cleaner and better technology can really enable us to make better products and services. We can also look back in history and see when we were making things in pre-abundance eras in careful ways, and look at those approaches, as well as to look to nature for its natural way of reducing, of not creating waste. So biomimicry helps us design as well. But we're looking at how people in the supply chain need to be treated fairly and supported and looked after through design for ethical production, and understanding how we can design to reduce people's need to consume. And we can dematerialize and develop systems and services. So that's all really about reducing consumption, overconsumption and overproduction. And design activism, as I mentioned, bringing our design voices to the debate to really work towards change. So as we take those principles, what we're doing with circular design is a deep dive around number 2. And we kind of got to this point after many years of working with these 10, with different kinds of stakeholders and allowing them to code their work. So look at where the biggest impacts were occurring and then start there. And then fold in and bring in the other approaches as well to make a kind of series of continuous improvements and a sort of evolving business plan towards much more sustainable products. And what we found is that number 2, design for cyclability, when we did score it using things like the Higg index, we really saw big improvements. And this led us then to work on projects which really explored circular design in detail, like the Mistra Future Fashion project, where we worked with brands on making circular products. So from recycled materials that last a long time or last a really short amount of time and then get recycled afterwards into new materials. So we've been exploring the systems, the material systems and the production systems needed for circularity, but also speeds that are inherent in our wardrobes as well. So really understanding the benefits that both fast and slow can bring through design. And the unique advantages. It's really exciting to look at the unique advantages that can come about through circular materials. So as we take old cotton, for example, through a chemical regeneration process, we create a liquid. And whilst we're in that liquid state, we can do different things that can't be done if we're mechanically recycling, for example. So we can keep color, we can add waterproofing, we can engineer wicking properties. So this is really allowing us to sort of pursue circular materials with novel advantages that give people additional benefits, but also reduce the chemical footprint of finishing. So all these ideas of going forward into the HEREWEAR project, and we're framing the challenge this time around bio, local, and circular. So these elements coming together are forming the brief for us to make the guide, to make the guidelines. So bio-based materials coming from agricultural waste, but also how we're processing and finishing this particular group of materials. And then for local, what are people's needs in a particular geographic location? What kind of garments do they need? And then what cut and construction and trims are needed? But also what repair and reuse behaviours can we support and encourage and advise in that, for that particular local context? As well as then understanding the benefits of the transportation system being reduced because of being geographically located, and the collection and the sorting that might take place, as well as the future manufacture and upcycling. And circularity, although we're not reprocessing the fibres, we are looking at labelling, and we're starting with the end in mind, as we have done for other projects. So we will understand which recycling process our bio-based material products are going to go into, and they'll be labelled accordingly using the circularity ID tagging. So this is all coming together in the Bio 10, the Circular Design Guidelines, where we understand what designers need to be doing with this new group of materials. They feel differently, they wear differently, they function differently, they're good for some types of products and not for others. What are the particular details that we're going to need? We're feeding those guidelines into the circular fashion software feature to really help designers work with this very exciting group of materials. So thank you for listening.
Hi everyone, my name is Jonna and I work as the Circular Design Lead at Circular Fashion, which is one of the partners of the Hairware project. And Circular Fashion is a Berlin-based company creating software tools and services to enable circularity in the fashion industry. And we do this through a holistic approach on circularity, starting with the design phase, creating tools for designers to design circular garments, to the use phase, working on the Circularity ID product passport so that a customer can scan and get access to needed data and information to make sustainable choices in the use phase, to working on the end-of-life strategies such as sorting and recycling. And we're thrilled to be part of the Hairware project, working with brilliant partners on further developing some of these tools. But it all starts with design. So core to everything that we do is the fact that, yeah, sustainability and circularity starts with design. And we need to be more responsible and creative in the way we design not only the products we use, but also the systems they are part of, so that resources can circulate and use for longer. And I will share a bit more of our approach to circularity, the design strategies we work with, and yeah, also what we see as opportunities in the industry to then share what we're developing with our Hairware partners, which is a tool that will help, that we're hoping will help designers to navigate all these opportunities and be able to make good decisions in the design stage. And we think that for a product to be circular, we need to have this holistic view on it. So we need to, first of all, ensure that we have circular materials, designing it for longevity, designing it for circularity, engaging the user in the system, and also to enable these systems for sorting and recycling so that a product is designed for circularity, but it also has a plan of how to circulate. But if we're zooming in for this talk on the specifically on the design strategy part, we're following two main strategies. One, which is designing for material cyclability, so taking a more technical view on putting materials and parts together in a way that the product stays recyclable. And the second part is designing it for longevity, so both through a functional and an emotional lens, making sure that a product is designed to last. Designing for material cyclability. This means to combine all components in a way so that the whole product can be reused or recycled. And this we can do either through a monocycle approach or a design for disassembly approach. starting with the monocycle approach. This is about matching all the components with the main material cycle. So including the lining, the sewing thread, label, so that the entire product can be recycled. And key to this design strategy is to reduce the complexity, reduce the number of components and trims, and really see what do we need in this garment. And this is a good strategy, of course, for more simple products like basic t-shirts or jerseys, etc. But we've also seen like really creative, nice examples of substituting metal parts for embroidery, etc. Designing for disassembly is an approach where we're designing a product so that the components can be recovered separately, because for some products, of course, there's a functional or an aesthetic need to have different materials in there that are intended for different cycles. So this kind of design approach also opens up possibilities for multifunctional use, and it also opens up repairability solutions if components can be taken off the garment and repaired instead of the whole garment being repaired. And yeah, we see examples here of it where the jacket, the inner coat is designed fully intended for the recycling, for polyester recycling, and the outer coat is designed for cellulosic cotton recycling. So these can be separated with the screwable buttons. Designing for longevity is about prolonging the lifespan of the product by making it last in function, but also in style, and giving opportunities to update and modify the garment for changing needs and desires. And functional durability strategies to look for design strategies to look for here are to reinforce parts that are more liable to tear by wear and use, for example, the crotch, studying the use pattern of the product to understand where does these kind of strategies need to take place, and also to do reinforcements of parts like through double stitching, double layers of fabric, or fixing stitches with a thick thread. And emotional durability is about adding elements which makes the user want to wear a piece for longer. So using materials or textiles that age and evolve over time, for example, denim or leather, which marks personal wear and tear. And a big focus here is also through storytelling and transparency of the design and production, which have a strong potential to increase the kind of the emotional connection. Transformability is to design garments with the potential to transform over time and be used in various styles and for various occasions to be more multifunctional. It's a nice design strategy as it also invites the user to be part of the design and or making process of a product if they themselves can intertwine with it. And ways to do this is, for example, through a DIY kit and guide or open source designs of patterns or other co-creating processes. And within Hairware, so what we're seeing in the industry is that there's tons of innovation and design strategies, but it might be tricky for a designer to navigate all this and see what actually will fit me, which kind of strategy should I follow? A design for longevity, transformability, recyclability. So what we want to develop is an interactive tool that will support designers in finding suitable material and design strategies for their specific product type and use case and sustainability values. So what it is some kind of questionnaire that is asking a designer questions such as, what product are you designing? What end of life solution are you aiming at? How often is this product expected to be used, etc. And once going through this questionnaire, as you can see here on the right side, suitable design strategies and materials will be presented that are relevant to the specific case. And we think that such a feature might be very helpful in getting all this knowledge and innovation and opportunities condensed for a designer, but also because circularity is not a one-size-fits-all kind of strategy, so it might look completely different from one company to the other. So this is what we want to help designers navigate and find their way within the world of circularity and sustainability. And also what we're very excited to work with all the Hairware partners on translating all these kind of strategies into a tool that will be launched by end of the Hairware project. And that was it. And I hope this day is really great, and reach out if anything. Thank you very much for listening.
My name is Jutta Hildenbrandt, and I'm a researcher at Research Institutes of Sweden. My area of research is life cycle assessment and systems analysis for, among other products, also textiles. RISE is currently collaborating with UAL and other European partners in a European research project called HEREWEAR. We had previous research collaborations between UAL and RISE also, which addressed future fashion and circularity of textiles and fashion. We'll report also some of the selected results from then. The overall aim of the HEREWEAR project is to support the development of fibers, fabrics, and garments with a better sustainability performance compared to existing options on the market. We have several work packages that address technical aspects, business aspects, and design aspects. What we see as contributing factors is choosing bio-based instead of fossil-based raw materials, developing fabrics that are pleasant to wear and at the same time robust to be worn and washed many times, and designing garments with the potential to be favorites. There are other aspects. This is just a selection. We want to evaluate the environmental, social, and economic aspects to address the 3 pillars of sustainability, and that's our work package 6 common goal. We use this based on life cycle assessment. This is an established framework. There's a global standard for principles and the framework since about the 1990s, and you can see the illustration from the ISO here on the left part of the screen. However, the term LCA is not protected, and not all studies follow the standard, and moreover the standard leaves room for assumptions and choices. Studies have been performed since about 50 years, some of them before the standards were established, and results from LCA therefore need to be read in context with a goal and scope definition and possible limitation to specific aspects. In general, it's a technique for addressing the environmental aspects and potential environmental impacts throughout a product's life cycle by compiling inputs and outputs, evaluating potential environmental impacts, and interpreting results. Limitations can be that only a part of the life cycle is addressed, and that's perfectly fine. This study can be then called a cradle-to-gate study. And when you see environmental product declaration, that's exactly what is done. So this is a life cycle-based eco-label to addresses options for textile industry and the supply chain to remove or reduce the environmental impacts and report on it to the general public. It also supports zooming in on specific processes and process innovation. However, it leaves potentially important parts of the life cycle out, and that can be a bit of a problematic part. For instance, if you want to address circularity aspects, and then you need a full life cycle from cradle to grave. This is an important topic in industry and in research for us. The boost for circular economy that is currently high on the agenda and is increasing demands to utilize products in a better way. Options to close the loop for materials and for components and products need to be considered, and this really needs to consider a full life cycle perspective. The illustration that you can see is from 2007, so it also predates a bit the debate or the current work in circular economy. But what you can see is that material recycling means that less natural resources need to be extracted and less waste has to be brought to landfills. Whereas the reuse of products means that also processing activities in manufacturing and assembly can be avoided. So it's clearly an additional benefit that can be done if you go beyond recycling. Now, some results, just a short glimpse on results from the previous research project, Mr. Future Fashion. Here, 6 garments were investigated, which represent a Swedish wardrobe, and moreover, the Swedish electricity during the use phase for laundry, drying, and ironing was assumed, which has quite a low share of fossil fuels. So it's a lot of hydropower included here. On the left side, you see climate impacts. On the right side, you see the water scarcity impacts. And on the left side in pie charts, you can actually see that the material phase dominates climate impact. So it's fiber production, yarn production, fabric production, and wet treatment together that have a high impact on the result. Whereas on the right side, it's only one contributor that dominates with 87%. Very highly, and it's the cotton cultivation that really dominates the water scarcity. Gives you an idea also that it can be really relevant to check different types of environmental impacts beyond climate. Another selected result that came out from the Future Fashion project was an additional conclusion, focuses on the supply chain and what the supply chain can do and should do to contribute to a more environmentally compatible garments. Here, better production technology and better chemical selection were identified as the actions for which the supply chain has a large impact. That's emphasized by using capital letters in line 2 for action 2 and action 4. Increasing the lifespan can certainly have a large impact when a complete life cycle is considered, but the influence of suppliers is, however, somewhat limited, and the material durability is a basic requirement, but design choices might be just as important to make sure that the number of uses actually increases in practice. So this is a bit out of scope for the supply chain. And that's that for today. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Jutta, for that really brilliant presentation and summary of the LCA work from both Mistra and Hereware projects. I've been tasked to respond very briefly and wanted to give a perspective from a design point of view. I'm Professor Kate Goldsworthy, and I've been working with Jutta and the environmental assessment team on the Hereware project for the last 18 months or so. And as Jutta pointed out, we learned so much about how design could integrate LCA understanding into an embedded practice through our collaboration on Mistra Future Fashion. It was a challenge, but I think the learnings on both sides were quite profound. As designers, I think we need to understand our decisions in order to avoid regrettable substitutions, but the complexity of impact assessment can really be overwhelming at times. Mistra Future Fashion was really a pivotal point in that it was the first time we'd conducted research with environmental scientists in such an interdisciplinary team. We worked on our concept development in collaboration with iterations of LCA, and our final propositions were fully quantified as a result. If we can understand impact like this, there's huge potential for improvement. We've continued to develop methods for this through other projects, but Hereware is really our most ambitious yet. We've taken the collaboration further with a focus on 3 elements: circularity, bio-based materials, and local systems of production. By working with defined product types from our industry partners as baseline scenarios and embedding members of the design team into the environmental assessment team, we hope to foster a close working relationship and a better understanding of the process and insights. These interdependencies have really been a key aspect of building a mutual understanding on Hereware in many parts of the project, but especially in LCA. This has involved building our circular design stories in new ways with garment-specific baseline scenarios, many conversations and working group sessions to unpick the life cycle story of that garment and see where changes can be made, and the stage we're currently at, building those stories into propositions based on defined guidelines to suggest improvements. These feed into the environmental process for scrutiny and further input in iterative cycles until we have defined the most promising outcomes. We're very much at the start of this process now, so it's an exciting time. I think there's something really interesting going on in industry right now, an emerging acceptance of the importance of environmental data in design. SMEs are needing to quantify the positive impacts of their innovations in order to sell into the supply chain. Tech companies are offering digital solutions to aid understanding and communication. People like Made to Flow, Made from, Segura, and our very own Circular Fashion on Hairware. And the bigger brands are even employing in-house environmental scientists to work closely on new developments. So the challenge for us in Hairware, I think, is to bring all these threads together to be able to have an informed innovation process and show how the local bio-based circular economy can really evolve as a sustainable solution for the fashion and textiles industry.
So great to have those three videos together and really see the perspective from sort of like the academic background that we have at CCD and those tools that are sort of evolving through the Hereware project, the approach that circular fashion has is really close to businesses and really understanding the needs of designers, and then really sort of like diving deep into like the life cycle assessments, technical and scientific approach. So we've got some really interesting questions here, and there's one that's been quite highly upvoted, which is, how do we consider trade-offs between different aspects if they occur, for example, water and chemicals versus climate impact? And like that is really where the collaboration between the design and the LCA in the Hereware project is being absolutely key. So what we have is that we've got a team of LCA experts, Jutta as one of them, working directly with the designers. So that includes us at CCD and the circular fashion team, as well as the SMEs that we're working with on the project. And we're trying to understand how we can use LCA to inform design decisions. So LCA tends to be used as an assessment tool at the end of a project. But here, with this sort of quite deep collaboration, we're going back and forth and we're trying to understand how a small design, a design decision early on in the process might have repercussions in LCA, and then adjust the judgment as we go along. So that includes understanding what different assessment impacts can be used. Like if we are moving to sort of a specific bio-based fiber, how is that going to affect the environmental impacts on climate change? How is like transport going to be coming into play? So this is really a key part of the project that we're working on. So I hope that answers that question. So it's like through that sort of back and forth collaboration that we're doing that. Another question is sort of quite connected to that idea of using LCA also. It's to what extent do you think circularity will help us with the climate crisis? And I wanted to connect that back to the presentation that Becky showed us at the beginning, and this idea of circularity being one part of many different aspects that relate to sustainability, and really considering how we're also working on sort of social impacts, how we're also connecting to ideas around design activism, how we're connecting with communities. Circularity is really sort of the driving force, and it's like we're designing for recycling, we're designing for recovery, but we're taking all those different elements of sustainability on board, and that means also addressing the climate crisis. I guess I'll take one last question, which is, does circular design change the aesthetic of clothing? How will users notice? And does it make it more expensive? So the question around price, oh, Becky, did you want to jump in there?
I'm happy for you to answer that, and then I'll come in.
Great. So yeah, the question around price is always going to be a complicated one. Like there's going to be trade-offs in different ways. Like we're looking like at different types of products that can accommodate for some shifts in price. So that's also, like Jonna was saying, really like product specific. But I guess like the exciting part there is really this idea of like how and if will circularity change the design and like the relationship to the user. The examples that Jonna showed us around design for disassembly, so designing monomateriality, actually point to the way in which taking on circularity strategies can influence the design, but it can actually be like a positive aspect. It can be something that helps us embed new functionality, whether it's like with a modular garment or a garment that's made to last extra long. And those are the effects that sort of like benefit the user directly. The user will be sort of going towards that product, thinking about like the ways in which it's going to respond to their needs better, how this might be like an investment piece to connect that back to the price question, that they might be able to take like to use for longer. And that's what we're aiming to develop, is like guidelines that will support designers to develop those products that respond to users' needs, that are designed to last for a long time, but also be potentially recoverable and recyclable at end of life. That's it for my answer to the question. Becky, do you want to go in? Yeah, no, you did brilliantly. I just wanted to sort of add in that you know, in terms of the climate crisis, we've been trying to move the industry to act more quickly for such a long time now, and it's only now that we have carbon kind of targets and a whole kind of different conversation going on, that people are galvanizing around actions a bit more. And so although we can't ignore all the other impacts, especially the social ones, we do have a moment to really make progress by focusing on carbon, by focusing, you know, using LCA and really looking at the different choices that are out there that will bring the energy right down. And because of that, it becomes a little bit of a sort of, you know, one track conversation, but there's a really good reason for that. You know, it actually sort of is accelerating the investment. It's really taking the conversation forward. And I just wanted to sort of point out that report from WRAP, Textiles 2030, you know, which sort of building actually on or coming after the Mr. Future Fashion scoping, which took the Swedish industry and kind of proposed how 50% of the carbon impacts could be reduced through a series of steps. You know, WRAP has done a sort of similar thing in the UK, and circularity, and by that means using recycled fibres, making clothes last longer, recycling at the end of life. They've identified will make a 26% improvement in the industry in carbon. So, you know, it's a real, if we can do more of it, it's going to make a difference, but it's not everything. I suppose that was, yeah, what I wanted to point out. Great, thank you very much. And with that, we're going to move into our last section of this event, which will be shorter. We'll have around 15 minutes of back-to-back presentations. So I'm very happy to sort of bring into our virtual event Natalia Kirilova, who's going to be talking about digital networks. We'll then hear from Elvis Sandu about communities of designers and users, and then from Rosie Hornbuckle on complex collaboration. So here we go.
Hello, my name is Natalia and I'm a project manager at Sketch. Sketch is an online B2B sourcing and networking platform where fashion brands can connect to manufacturers and more players to bring their fashion products to life. Complete with planning software, the entire product development and production processes can be managed online for smoother communication and efficient collaboration. Key competencies of Sketch are matching algorithm connecting brands to the right suppliers, supply chain management tools, e-learning resources, event management, synergistic partnerships, sustainable change management, international networking, and groundbreaking R&D projects. In the HEREWEAR project, Sketch supports such tasks as stakeholder community building and servicing, as well as dissemination and communication. We are leading the task software platforms for implementation, which focuses on building a network manufacturing service that can be collaboratively used by fashion designers, brands, suppliers, and manufacturers to work together on their projects. We are taking on collaborative approach in Hereware. Together with Circular Fashion, Mybine, and Queen of Raw, we are working on aligning our software platforms, extending our users, and pulling together our capacities to propose an innovative and performant set of digital tools, making circular fashion design more accessible even to smaller producers. To facilitate this, the partners will further enrich their platforms with the following. Circular Fashion will further develop its circular design software towards an interactive development tool, providing best practices and recommendations for materials and circular design strategies for specific product cases. Sketch, in its turn, will extend its platform and include bill of material feature and align the request for quote process with focus on Hereware materials and manufacturers. Queen of Raw will offer its marketplace that deals with textile production waste to the specific value chain targeted by Hereware, which is bio-based circular textiles. To enable our target users smoothly navigate through the partners' platforms, we have established the following complementary user journey for brands. Starting on the Circular Fashion platform, the user can select the design strategy and select or get recommended the eligible materials. Once the selection is made, the user moves on to the Sketch platform to specify their request for quote-related information, enrich bill of materials, browse through the materials in the library, and consider leftover and waste usage per material. Also, they are able to browse through manufacturers and confirm their quote. From this point onwards, the user is able to proceed with their production, supported by, first of all, Mybine to confirm and proceed with the handling of the cut waste, Circular Fashion to enrich the product passport, circularity ID, and make this information available to consumer, and also Queen of Raw that would then offer the material on their marketplace. The described user flow addresses a fair share of garment production in Europe, represented by relatively small but agile and innovative SMEs, well networked together, organized in a strong community, and supported by digital tools to manage their process efficiently. With this user journey, we are targeting stakeholders involved in garment design and production, as well as textile waste handling. This holistic solution for design, production, and waste handling would allow the setting up of the value chains for making circular bio-based textiles possible and sharing resources for open innovation and collaboration. With this, I will wrap up my presentation. Thank you for listening, and get in touch with us if you want to learn more about what we do in Hereware. Thank you.
Hi everybody, my name is Elvis Sandu. I am representing Mybine, the partner project of Hereware from Iași, Romania. I am a designer maker and community catalyzer. I have a master's degree in fashion design and 10 plus years of working experience in this field. Before I continue with my presentation, I would like to describe a little bit the local context and my background. Iași was considered a great textile industrial center during the communist era. A good part of the factories at that time have disappeared. So did the workforce that emigrated to the West, but not all of them, fortunately for us. Those who remained made use of all the knowledge they had about garment making. After the state-owned factories disappeared, many large and small private companies started to appear, producing in the loan system. And although we have a design faculty for many years in Iași, a good part of the students who graduate here have nowhere to work. It's a sad reality that also impacted me during my college years. And besides this shortcoming, I lacked access to a community with the same interests. I lacked open communication with students from a technical school. And I also missed visiting factories and all that other stuff. After 3 years of working in my own workshop, making clothes to order and trying to build my own slow fashion brand, and 3 more years if I had enough of this solitude, I discovered the Redu Atelier, which at the time was a project of the association Mybine. A project started in 2014 under the name Reused, Upcycle and Redesign Clothes and Accessories, and which was supported by a grant from Norway. In the autumn of 2017, Redu moved from the status of Mybine project to that of a standalone entity in the form of a social enterprise by the name Atelierul Redu. and in which the association is the majority shareholder, and in which Anka, Andrea, myself, Gabriela, and Maria are core shareholders, holding half of the shares. This decision to create a company co-owned by the people who work for it was taken as a minimal form of gratitude to those who have made extraordinary efforts to keep alive and develop the Redo project. The results of our social enterprise are backed by the involvement of the community. Most of the collecting and sorting, and sometimes even sewing, was done by volunteers from our community. What we offered in change was a cleaner local environment, awareness raising about the impact of fast fashion on the people and the planet, a chance to use their hands in creating amazing products, and also a chance to create a network of involved and concerned people about our future on a planet with finite resources. So over the course of 6 years of existence, we gathered a lot of knowledge and user experience by keeping a one-to-one contact with our clients through services like repair and upcycle. Our role in the HEREWEAR project is to help create design guidelines for use, reuse, repair, and upcycle of the future bio-based materials that will be developed through HEREWEAR and towards lifecycle extension. Our second role is to help set the grounds of local networks across Europe of users, makers, designers, academia, and policymakers. From the beginning of the project, we started a partnership with the town hall of Iași to install collecting bins for the used clothing that the community donated. We also partnered with the two most important faculties of design and making of garments, the Visual Arts and Design School and the Textile and Management one. Our approach was simple. We understood from the very beginning that behavioral change had to happen in the mindsets of both makers and wearers. That's why we created and maintained a very close relationship with both faculties and the community and tried to create a fertile environment for innovation and rethink the way we produce and the way we consume. Here you can see a graphical representation of the quadruple helix framework that we use in order to change the mindsets of our community. And here are some photos of the workshops that we did with partners like the design faculty and the industrial faculty. And also with the community from Iași. The fast-paced world that we live in has made us forget about the art of repairing and the importance of creating relationships with our belongings. The simple fact that we can so easily replace a product just because a button has fallen off or a seam has come undone is a habit that costs us a lot in terms of resources. If we look at the circuits of matter in nature, we immediately notice that there is no waste in nature. Every molecule is used in one way or another. Of course, humans have always replicated the processes from nature, but now we are clumsier and rushing more than ever. Well, all of it is not lost. New scientific research and discoveries from projects just like HEREWEAR are helping us make use of all the unwanted or discarded material we generate. Yet we should understand and accept that the energy invested in creating a new product is far greater than that of fixing a broken one. Extending the life of clothes made from bio-based materials through repairing should stand as a pillar for the circularity of garments. On behalf of my Bine, thank you for your attention. Bye-bye.
I think one of the reasons that HEREWEAR is so exciting is because it presents the possibility of working at multiple system scales. Often prototyping at the level of material or production systems doesn't allow for specific geographical contexts where social innovation can take place. But this multi-level approach in HEREWEAR offers the potential for systemic innovation, both materially and socially. In our previous work, we've developed approaches for working with the diverse experts and scientists, social scientists, companies, end users, and so on, to gain this systems perspective of textile life cycles. However, HEREWEAR takes this complexity further than ever before and has allowed us to push our tools and methods for collaboration to the limit. Complex collaboration is implicit in a project like HEREWEAR, where a multi-level systems approach requires a wide spectrum of stakeholders and experts to reach a collective understanding of what, why, and how to transition together. Within the technology and material innovation space of the project, partners have varied conventions of research and practice, different languages, different types of knowledge and experiences. This reflective practice sketch shows the funded project partner in pink. However, there is also the world beyond the funded project, the world where we want to support transition. The stakeholder community to the right is crucial to effecting this change, and so provides an important pool of potential adopters and collaborators with whom we must build proximity. This adds another layer of knowledge flow, translation and collaboration to democratize project knowledge and provide agency. The whole ecosystem of diverse actors creates what we can see as a complex collaboration. Focusing on the internal collaboration within the project, this is a screen recording of a face mapping exercise we ran at the Hairware virtual kickoff meeting. Partners placed themselves within the project, building the know-who form of knowledge, which is so important at the beginning of a new collaboration. The map shows people without connections at the start of the project, but 18 months in, we could almost stitch a web over this tableau, as the relationships and knowledge flows have taken on a life of their own. With all the will in the world, and even with the amazing generosity and openness of the Hairware partners, this diversity presents some challenges for collaboration. Our work is siloed. There are misunderstandings in the terminology we use. We have different ideas about what the core concepts mean in different contexts, and the interconnections between our work are not so easy to understand or establish. Design research has a role to play in supporting some of the challenges inherent to complex collaborations. These don't need to be complicated or resource heavy. In fact, we've learnt that some of the most effective things we can put in place are really the most simplest. In Hairware, we enact this approach through the methodology team, a small group of project representatives working closely with the project coordinators. By building a focus on collaboration and knowledge flow into the project from the outset, we have an opportunity to respond to challenges as they emerge and co-design interventions accordingly. To give a specific example, I would like to briefly talk about the Hairware Partner Talk series. As with all technology projects, in Hairware there is a general requirement to meet periodically and share the progress and outcomes of tasks. While this is useful for keeping on top of the operational aspects of the project, these occasions are not so effective for building foundational principles, for understanding one another and mobilising different types of knowledge for the benefit of all. In Hairware, we decided to create a regular opportunity for partners to share their personal expertise on a topic of their choice. So far, partners have created 8 online talks over 18 months, and today will be the 9th, presented by Dita from the Microfactory. The Partner Talk series has had a multiplier effect. We get to know one another as people. We can be flexible and adaptive as the project unfolds, identifying emerging topics which may not have been identified or included in the original proposal. We can discuss cross-cutting themes that don't neatly fit within a specific project task, and we can begin to break down the disciplinary silos, enabling partners to make their own connections and appreciate everyone as a potential collaborator. We've also recorded and used these partner talks to open conversations with the Hairware stakeholder community. We've learnt a lot about one another's perspectives, acknowledging and accepting difference as the starting point for innovation, in the spirit of Light and Boys, who are quoted here. So from one relatively simple initiative, we can create knowledge flows and build the foundations for meaningful collaboration within and beyond the project. My role has been to create this space where collaboration and knowledge flow is prioritised, to co-create supportive tools and initiatives, to translate and build bridges between people, places and things. This is a responsive and adaptive form of translational design practice, attending to the needs of the collaboration to observe, reflect, learn, and then act iteratively. In this way, the aim of my research is to build methodologies that can be transferable across domains. The collaborations needed to enable transition in many different contexts are getting more and more complex as we seek to engage different system levels and actors. In design research, we can build capacity for supporting complex collaborations using design skills and co-design methods to democratise and mobilise knowledge so that people can act and be part of the transition. You might have noticed that all of the images I've shared are of online worksheets and meetings. In fact, we're at the 18-month point in this highly collaborative project, having never met in real life, but that's a discussion for another day. Thank you.
Hello everyone. I just wanted to say a huge thank you to Natalia and Elvis for providing those videos. Really, really interesting, and everyone all day. It's just been brilliant. I just wanted to pick up a couple of questions on collaboration. We're a bit short of time, but I think that most of the ones on Menti are sort of about how do we collaborate better and what happens when things go wrong. And I think the problem that we found is that collaboration and the effort that needs to go into it just isn't prioritized enough. And I think that's changing now. We're starting to see how design can really support collaboration if it's sort of brought in early enough to projects. But I think the real learning point in Hereware has been how the community aspect of the project can really help collaboration. It's just been eye-opening. And I think if there's a community, then this idea of not being alone, as Elvis sort of pointed out, this idea that we're not in this on our own, we're here together, and we can actually do so much more together than we can on our own. So I think that's the key to all this, is just focusing on it and actually treating it as part of the problem. Yeah. So I think we're going on to the discussion now. So I'll hand over to Becky to take us forward in that way.
Thanks, Rosie. Yeah, it's I love that last section and what you just said there, because of course these projects, they're about the technology, they're about the materials, they're about circularity, they're about climate, but it's taken a really long time to have the kind of work that you're leading on really recognized and embedded in the project. It's so important to make things work, to have these good collaborations. It needs real focus, it needs attention, it needs expertise. I'd love to bring our expert panel on the screen now, and we've asked them to create some responses, and I was going to follow the order that we've been looking at things, so sort of materials, bio, local, circular, collaboration, and actually everybody kind of covers these in different ways, but if you don't mind, I'm going to ask Veronica to come on and give her response first.
Hi, wow. You have been busy over the past 18 months. What a fantastic project. I think that, it's very clear, and what is really, really essential is the mapping work that you've done so far. I think focusing on issues like as simple as terminology, and enables that communication that we're talking about in order to sort of implement a circular system. And even within the fashion and textile discipline, we still don't use the same language for everything. So I think, especially in the bio-based space, terminology is a hindrance rather than a helper. So I think there's some fantastic work that's been done there, and sort of also building on the biofabricate work, is really, really important to acknowledge where good practice has happened elsewhere and build upon it rather than try and reinvent the wheel. And it's just incredible, sort of all the different projects, the microfactory and the network and all the level of detail that's going into the study. I think it's quite phenomenal. So amazing. This is the first time I've seen the work that you're doing on this project. So I'm just buzzing with lots and lots of comments and questions, but I will leave my other colleagues to pick up, and we'll have a fantastic discussion, I'm sure.
Thanks, Veronica. That's great and lovely to hear. I mean, I think what we'll talk about a bit later, because you're such an expert on bio, this, as we took the lid off this area, we just kind of went, whoa, and how much confusion and how many definitions are missing, and how little explanation there is there, and it goes from, I mean, we were looking at a garment yesterday, I think it was, which is labeled as being made from wood, so they're now labeling viscose as wood-based garments, in a really sort of public-facing commercial retail sphere, and it's so confusing for everybody. So I really think that there's a lot of work to be done around these definitions, and yeah, we'll come back to that definitely in the discussion. Thank you. And I'm going to now ask Adam to come on. Adam has joined us from Spain, essentially, more or less. Can you put your mic?
Somerstown.
Somerstown, via Bilbao.
I'm in a makerspace in Somerstown. But I was out in Prato actually last week, and that's something that I wanted to refer to here. So firstly, thanks for the opportunity to respond to this really ambitious and optimistic project. It's really exciting to see this work being done. I was particularly interested, I think, in the work that Jessie was sharing. So talking about building communities, and that reminded me serendipitously with this visit to Prato last week, where I met this company called Monocycle. You're probably familiar with them in your sector. They're textile manufacturers that reclaim and recycle fibres. And I was chatting to them as they were showing me around their amazing space and activities. And they were explaining to me about how they were the centre of this ecosystem, ecology system of businesses, about 50 of them. And they were saying, you know, if we want the fringing done, then we send it down the road there. If fringing is in fashion and people need fringing, it goes there. If we want to have, if there's some other embroidery or something we need doing, then it goes down there. They had a supply chain locally of about 50 organisations. Trucks kept coming and going. They weren't electric, and they were saying that they were getting hammered on the fuel price rises because of the number of even micro journeys around this town, moving the stuff about. And they were explaining to me about these 50 companies. They were explaining to me about how if fringing was in there, goes to fringer. But I thought to myself, and I asked them, well, what happens if fringing's not in? I said, so I can understand that there is this, there's a benefit to outsourcing all of those different skills and maintaining all of those different skills and all the different machinery necessary for it. And there's a benefit in outsourcing that if you're the company that otherwise would have to sit on it as sort of latent resource. And there's a benefit for the others in sort of being the specialist in that area. But I was trying to understand, well, what happens if fringing's not in? Do those people go out of business? And in fact, for your model to work, you've got to keep those people in business. And they said, no, even if fringing's not in, we still do some pre-orders. And so they were basically placing what they were referring to as pre-orders, which is just enough to keep that organisation in business, even if their activity was sort of out of favour from a fashion perspective at that time. Which brings me to a reflection and a question, really, which is to support these bio-based, local and circular economies. Do we need to start thinking about different business models, and are you exploring different business models? And actually, obviously what I've just described there isn't a cooperative business model, but it is a business model that's not solely driven by the idea of outsourcing risk. And in that idea of open innovation, which I've heard referred to a few times, we know that within that, that's the notion of sharing risks and sharing rewards. There's other reflections that I'd like to share linked to some of my the work that I'm involved in terms of design for social innovation and infrastructuring design for social innovation, which is about the practices that we deploy together to create the enabling conditions for social innovation. And I think that some of the understandings that we've got around that might contribute in some way to the conversation going on here and might resonate with that. But we can come back to that later on. But yeah, my question is, what about new business models? Are you seeing new business models? Is that a part of what you're exploring?
Oh, brilliant. Thank you, Adam. Yes, and I don't know why we haven't presented on it. Yes, the business model research is being done by EuroCat in Barcelona. And they've done a first internal report, which is looking at the SME stakeholders in the project and analysing their business at the moment, and then looking at how it can be evolved to fit into this circular local bio digitally linked proposal. So I can't really say much more than that, but I do know in the panel we can bring Jessie back in, and I think Dieter on the microfactory side of things to comment and pick up on some of those brilliant observations and things that you said there, Adam. So thank you so much. Thank you. I'm gonna stay here, don't go away, everybody. I'm now going to actually ask Sylvia, because Sylvia, Adam starts to talk about service and flows and people and new business models. And I think there's a real, crossover with your expertise in service design. And I think we're kind of slow in not having collaborated yet, because there's such a natural relationship between the needs of circularity and circular economies and service design. So not that I'm giving you a brief for your response, sorry, but please do come on and just say whatever you want.
Yes, definitely. And I've actually done a lot of work with Adam within local authority projects and communities, so we have quite a lot in common on our approach to that, I think. And I was really impressed on how many levels this project is working on, but also you were able to communicate through this event. And I think the levels that I picked up on were those of connections within the project, within very different disciplines and fields and priorities and all of that, and connections within communities and transitions within communities, as well as connections with kind of end users and the understanding of what is a life cycle of a product and what is that systemic impact that you might have through that product. And so let me think how to make this very short. I think on the point of view of the tech and the design working together and that impacting the communities and the people that are within those communities and are working for that, there's a really interesting parallel, I think, with the project that Rosie also worked on with me of Pharma Factory, and that idea of kind of initiating this dialogue and finding a common language. And when you were talking before about, understanding what those terms are and how do we understand, how do you communicate those supply chains to people? When I don't remember which talk, but someone said that natural is not better than synthetic. And, that is a really difficult concept to communicate. And I think that idea that you are embedding this within particular communities so that the community holds the agency and the understanding of how that works for them from both a business point of view as well as a kind of product point of view. I think that makes a lot of sense for this, because then it's end users and producers in dialogue, in a sense, on a much more local level. So you can understand how it has impacted the people around you and the industry around you. And that is a lot easier to understand, I think, than a massive supply chain and end-of-life products, etc. So yeah, I'm really interested in the connection between those two things, the understanding of how complex systems work with particular smaller local systems and how people live within them.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's coming up more and more now that we need to sort of work towards this understanding, this model, this shared language, but that it will be highly individualized and context driven. So at the point that we are at, where we've made these prototype garments and we're building the toolbox of materials and approaches and the way to LCA those sort of component parts, we've almost designed a way to flip the poster around and on the back have another version where it's just moved city, because region to region the variations kind of come into play, and that's fascinating. We're really just starting to sort of see what happens when you take a generic product made locally and then move it. It's, I think we're at the beginning of a new era, really, of how we're going to be able to make clothes, as well as the material sort of changes that are coming through. Thank you. Don't go away. Definitely want to come back to you on that. And next I want to bring in Sophie, because Sophie's it's a nice flow, really, because Sophie, she's working at the moment on a book chapter, but she's doing lots of other projects. But what she's talking about there is very much that we just have this European Western view of what circular economy is and what circular design is. And that, there's a sort of lack of a discourse, there's a lack of investment in other ways of being circular and local beyond our current scope and vision. So again, Sophie, you can respond to that, and you can just tell us what you think of the project anyway, and what you've been up to. So over to you.
Sure. Thank you for the lovely introduction, Becky. First of all, I'm very, very impressed by how much ground the HEREWEAR project has managed to cover in the last 18 months. And it's really great to see. And I think especially being able to explore the nuances between the intersections of circularity and local, but then also complex collaboration and bio-based. And as the presentations went on, I thought a lot about a community that I came across a couple of weeks ago. And it's mainly women, and they're based in the Eastern Highlands of Zimbabwe. And I thought it was very interesting to bring in here and kind of bring back to complex collaboration too, is that these women essentially, they make blankets out of fiber from trees. So they hand weave these fibers from trees, and they have a very intricate understanding of how their practices operate within their natural environment. So they know how to harvest the fibers from the trees, which trees to harvest them from in a way that has positive effects on the environment rather than a lack of effect on the environment. They know how to soften these fibers so that they are malleable, so that they can form a blanket. And these blankets are also very durable, very insulatory. So for example, some of them are hanging in the National Gallery, and they've lasted from 50 to 100 years. In terms of durability, and have also, the practice has been preserved over hundreds of years through colonialism, etc. And then I thought it was interesting to talk about terminology, because a lot of these women, they don't have the terms of like bio-based or cellular or biomimicry, but these are very much concepts that they're actively deploying throughout their practices and their weaving practices. But then that comes into, they have this vast body of knowledge that could be incremental for, innovation and development, but also for collaboration with different stakeholders. And then I think where the HEREWEAR project excites me is that there are those tools that are necessary to be able to collaborate, because there is a lack of common terminology. And to be able to collaborate in a way that's culturally sensitive. So a lot of these women have very specific family dynamics, and you don't want to create situations that could be harmful to these communities. But then exchange. So rather than exporting all of the knowledge that these women possess, which has been done a lot in Africa and Zimbabwe historically, being able to figure out tools that can be used to make sure that it's equitable, so that they're also gaining knowledge where they can refine their practices. Because I can comfortably say they're not the most comfortable blankets, but they are effective. But that's ways that they would also like to evolve and change their practices. But also they know how to biodegrade these blankets, and they know how to biodegrade them in a way that can be fed into crops. And that's something that's information that I think could be useful across the board. So definitely looking forward to seeing a lot of the tools that this project produces in terms of different ways that we can collaborate with that lack of language and terminology, which I think is hugely important moving forward, but extremely exciting. So thank you.
Thank you, Sophie. That was brilliant, because our tools need to be, there were other questions earlier on about, who can join in the communities, who can be part of the project. And while the films were going on, I was having a quick look, and, TCBL, Jessie, you're there, I know, but, they've got members in Egypt and the Far East, and I think the Congo, I can't remember the other one, but you can definitely join the TCBL network if you have access to internet, etc. So we could start sort of seeing how the networks can grow worldwide, but it is a little bit of a challenge for a European-based project that sort of defines that what it's trying to do is stimulate the European economy to be broader and inclusive, but we kind of have to be. And I think it's about how we make the models, how we share them, how we make the tools open, and then how we build more of opportunities for these exchanges and opportunities to work together. Gwen, brilliant collaborator, brilliant industry knowledgeable person. Your 3 minutes, please.
I'll really try and keep it to 3 minutes. Well, firstly, I mean, we cannot say it enough, such an impressive day of presentations. And I think we could talk for another 2 hours if we had the time. The thing that struck me the most was really, maybe not surprisingly, around the topic of circular design, and specifically the work that's being done through this project to develop guidelines, common circular guidelines, which I find to be incredibly important and very timely, because what I see in the industry at the moment is that there's really a kind of a split happening around this topic. There is no common language, no common definition, and many industry bodies, NGOs, but also brands are creating their own separate understanding and kind of framework for circular design, which is really muddying the water and stopping progress overall. So one question I would have, and maybe this is something to throw into the discussion in a moment, is how do we also build these circular guidelines so that they are responsive to changing dynamics and criteria? So as new technologies emerge, for instance, that these guidelines are something which are updatable and updatable by the collective. That's one thing that comes to mind. The other thing that I really enjoyed, and I think it was in the presentation from Circular.Fashion, was around, you know, the connection between circular design and also then the design of the system, and how those things have to work in parallel. So, you know, I think we're all very much on the same page there, in the sense that, you know, just because something is designed to be recyclable, it is not recyclable until it's taken back and it's recycled. So kind of how do we ensure that the system can make good on the promise that the designer has put in? And here, you know, what I find really interesting to think about is, alongside guidelines on how to design a circular product, how could we empower designers to also be really active in the system design itself? And you have that big focus on collaboration. I wonder, are you looking at, like, what are these blind spots and barriers that designers come up against when they try to not only create a circular product, but also kind of create the circular system for that product to flow into? And finally, the last thing that really struck me was the kind of modeling of these loops and these micro factory concepts. And I see, and I was fascinated to see the kind of the high tech, very automated kind of approach that's been taken. But one of the things that we're working a lot with at Circular Economy is also trying to understand how, you know, the transition to a circular economy can also, build greater inclusivity, build greater equity, how we can create, you know, just, fair, high quality jobs, for instance, through the development of these new circular supply chains. And so I was curious whether that has featured at all when you think of this kind of concept, which could be replicable in different areas. Is there a way for us to also model and understand really how people will be affected, and what kind of skills and jobs could also be created in those new systems? So that's my 2 cents.
Oh, always worth it. I'd like to invite anybody else from the Hereware project who's online who'd like to join the discussion to put their cameras on. I'd like to invite the audience to make sure that they've got the gallery view so that you can see everybody with their cameras on. I've been noting all of the comments and the potential questions, but I'd like to pick up on what Gwen's just said there, which is, you know, where are we as a project with the sense of the people and the communities and the well-being and the social innovation that can come from a proposal like this? Would anybody like to take that? Elvis, you've been doing some brilliant work and telling us and sharing with us so much about Maybeam and about the challenges, but also the richness that's come out of working in the community and building the community. And you've really understood that link to working with people, sharing skills with them and encouraging them to make their clothes last longer. As the project's progressing, and we've got these bio-based materials and the factory, the looped factory system, how do you see people working into this?
Well, thank you for asking. I think it's great that we have technology that's trying to help us a little bit in these issues. but it still breaks down to humans who are actually making the clothes. And from my knowledge of this aspect that's being taken care of in Hereware, we have the social LCA that it's going to be done to find out exactly if the ethics part is being taken care of. And we, as MyBine, have always militated for this ethical part of the industry. And we're, since 2019 or 2018, we are part of Clean Clothes Campaign, which is an international organization or cluster of organizations from around the world who are militating for workers' rights in the garment industry. And yeah.
Thank you, Elvis. I think we've got a lot more work to do. I think those, for me, looking at the proposals that and the calls that go into come from the EU, there needs to be a lot more joining up of the social sciences with the physical engineering fields, and so that we can actually really get the whole system in place. I'm going to actually ask Kate to come and respond to some questions, who had a little bit of an internet crash but is back. And you're there, and you missed all the juicy questions about LCA and people. Actually, the last one that came in was about where do we stand on the white paper about greenwashing and the way that fashion brands are using LCA in a really superficial way. How can we kind of counter that, or where do we stand on that? Or anything about LCA you want to say?
Yeah, I guess, and apologies for missing the discussion earlier, but I think one of the, well, just like lots of the things that have been discussed today, a lot of it is in language and finding new ways to collaborate across kind of our disciplinary boundaries. And I think there's been just as there has been in circularity, there's an enormous shift going on in industry, I guess fueled by climate emergency, net zero targets, to really be able to quantify impacts, because I think that in the past, it's perhaps been a little vague or difficult for, as a designer at least, to truly understand the impacts of your design decisions. And I know at CCD it's been something that we've been passionate about for a long time, and Hereware is a brilliant project to test these things. But some things that are happening, like I think the technology startup community is addressing it. They're trying to use sort of AI, machine learning, sort of new ways to access and represent data to make those decisions easier to make. I think there's something really interesting going on with fashion brands that are being populated by environmental scientists. So, I think we have some good friends, environmental scientists, who are now heading up sustainability efforts in some fashion labels, and some of the big brands have set up whole departments where they're bringing in biodiversity and environmental science specialists into the team. And I think that kind of, bringing those worlds together and working together is, to me, the most sort of important focus in that area for now.
Yeah, and more definitions, more clarity, and sort of helping things along, really. And I think this bridge that you've been, and your work's been building between the different areas, and actually sort of questioning LCA, that's been a real sort of factor for helping other brands and researchers kind of get involved and not just see it as a accounting that happens too late on,
Exactly that.
I'm going to move around the table, just make sure that everybody has a say. And I'm going to come back to Veronica, because I just know that there's so much about the bio-based materials field that and your brilliant work in this area. How can we, it was a question earlier on, how can we get clearer? How can we help communicate this sector more clearly? I mean, I've been with very knowledgeable people from very exclusive brands that have told me that they're using a material from a cactus that completely composts, and you sort of have to bite your tongue a little bit or offend them by sort of saying, no, it doesn't, it's full of something else, actually not so nice. But what can we do?
Well, I'm going to try and think of the polite way to say this, but I think that there's a lot of myth in marketing. There's a lot of investment, private investment, that's gone into developing some types of bio-based materials to fill the gap where funding from academia or funding from the government has falls short, because let's face it, the reality is that a lot of these bio-based materials for textiles, not for packaging, but for textiles, are currently at TRL, so a technology readiness level between 4 and 5, which is otherwise known as the Valley of Death. And the Valley of Death it means that essentially the technology is at a stage where it's been proven in the lab and it's been proven sort of in small scale, and it needs significant buy-in from the industry as well as investment to develop it to TRL 9, where it's ready to be scaled up. Now, the problem is that certainly in the UK, we know that investment in R&D within the textiles industry is literally at the bottom of the barrel compared to other more sort of attractive boys' toys, engineering, travel, transport, blah, blah, blah. In the context of sustainability and reducing carbon footprint. So we're in a really bad way and really vulnerable. And what's happened in the States is that, you've got these venture capitalists that have pumped gazillions of dollars into certain technologies in order to help them sort of move out of the Valley of Death. But what happens is they don't share what they've found because they're not publicly funded. So the findings, all the problems in terms of scale up, remains knowledge contained within an organization that isn't being shared. Now that is problematic for the ecosystem, because it means we have a completely inefficient ecosystem where everybody is trying to solve the same problems. And that is a massive, massive obstacle if we're going to progress with bio-based materials within textiles. So it is so challenging. You want private investment, but it comes at a cost. And, it's a tricky one. And I really don't want to, I really do believe that we've got to come up with new ways of making the stuff that we need in order to sort of have an economy and, have an industry. But there's some serious dots that need to be joined. There you go. Some serious dots that need to be joined. And I think, the government really does need to step in. We see, we can see sort of from an EU perspective, what a fantastic amount of resources have gone into developing these projects and really seriously addressing this. And I think there's opportunity there. But we need to, within the UK, we need to sort of consolidate and make sure that we can, we join those efforts and sort of step outside the need to have private investment at such early levels. Anyway, I'm sort of going to get off my soapbox here.
That's brilliant and really useful. Everything we hope for from you, Veronica. Thank you so much. I think it is really tricky in terms of, understanding the investment, the marketing. Makes projects like this really important. And I think the definitions that we're going to be able to offer, we almost need similar marketing budgets to make sure that people are accessing the information and it gets out there. I'm going to come to Lynn and Jessie and Dieter. Can you comment a little bit about the way in which the EU is looking at these kinds of projects, and in a way, a tiny bit about the backstory of Hairware, because it's sort of ambitious in that it wants to specifically create circular economy for fashion textiles using bio waste in Europe. What does that what for you is that looking like now, 18 months into the project? And I'll come to Lynn.
Yes, thank you, Becky. Yeah, as you say, we are an ambitious project because we are tackling, or we try to tackle, 3 different parts. We have the local effect, the circular effect, and the bio-based. But I think if we can contribute to each of them in a certain way, maybe not to all of 3 for each application, but for some applications we will maybe work more with the bio-based. For the others, we focus on the circularity. And I think if we can contribute to each of them, even if it's not to the highest extent, it will already make a big impact to show that it's possible. But of course, indeed, it's an ambitious project. And as Veronica mentioned, like on the bio-based, there is lots of discussion going on. We have availability also of bio-based materials, which can be a challenge because it's really emerging, not only in textile industry, but in all industries. So it's not that easy to get hands on all the bio-based materials. So that's another challenge that we are facing. But I do believe that we, even though we have the 3 pillars, it's also good to give some, let's say, some leverage or some things also for 1 pillar only.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, this question of scaling and what it takes, and having viable prototypes, really exploring new design thinking methods, the business models, having all the elements in the project means that we're finding out new things that can go in multiple directions as well. So I'd like to come to Jessie. Are you still on the call? Yes, there you are. Adam was talking about community, new business models, the Prato example, of course, which is probably the best economy of scale in the circular fashion industry model there is, really, Prato. I mean, what do you see that we're going to be able to do with these communities? How do they connect up for you?
If I may be maybe even a little impolite, pick up from where Veronica left off. HEREWEAR is a really interesting and strange project for me. I've been doing European projects for 30 years. And it's as though what we're doing is research about producing a new culture. We're doing what researchers are supposed to do. We're making boy toys and we're making materials and stuff you can touch and grab and put into deliverables and write up into papers. But what we're really looking at, and this is what connects to Rosie's presentation and the question of the expert talks, is that we're making culture among ourselves. And we're trying to explore if the circular economy really is a radically transformative thing. We're not talking about businesses using recycled polyester to make your new swimming trunks and continue to overproduce like they did before. We're talking about something that is quite different. The Commission knows it's quite different. They're asking in this double language for us to do research like we know how to, but can we please do that something different that's going to help us make a total transformation of our society? They're good at setting targets, but they don't have a clear idea of how to get there. And in here, for those who are not in the project, look at the logo of HEREWEAR. Well, for one thing, there's not one logo, okay? And this gives the idea of the concept that there's no clear boundary here. There's sort of overlapping things. We're used to thinking of systems as sets, as boundaries, and they're the dots inside and the dots outside. And now, Becky, I'm misbehaving enormously, but I'll get back to your question. The community is all about taking away the boundary of who's doing the research and who's not, who's in a European project and who's not, who's the producer and who's the end users. We've got the circular economy, in my view, as it's evolving in this project, is not, I used to think about it as a sort of supply chain, more just connecting more dots, but it's not the dots, it's the boundaries between the dots that we have to bring down, that things are useful for things that we didn't think they would be useful for. that we're pushing things in one direction. And so we've got to break down those barriers. And I think, like Rosie's things, the community is having an effect on the project partnership. And it's just starting, but I'm beginning to see it happen, of people changing their stance of what am I doing here? I mean, we are making bio-based materials, but for whom? How are they going to be used? That question is perhaps even more important than whether the thing is cheap to produce or nice to the touch or so. Who's going to use this and how and for what purpose? And having the community, having these people look at you while you're doing this thing and ask embarrassing questions is what makes you reframe. It's all about reframing. And can we reframe? And the talk about business models. Oh, by the way, Adam, did he disappear? No. The Zoom moves you around, sorry. So I lose track of you. The TCBL project, which is where I'm coming from, was all about business models. And the lead partner of TCBL, and this is a research project, was the city government of Prato. Just representing the idea that production is in the public sphere. It is a thing of the public interest. And I think with the circular economy concept, with all of the concepts that we're working in with Hereware, we need to rethink the fact that the Commission is funding this because it is in the public sphere. And this needs to be taken into the public sphere. And the main thing we need to do is to stop thinking about companies, because companies are boundaries, terrible boundaries, but it gives us all the wrong idea of whose business model are we talking about, of whose circularity are we talking about. Business models need to connect companies, like those people pre-ordering and giving a hand to make sure that the district survives, the collective thing. And we need to transform, and research needs to be in the, and design, I'm always arguing with Becky about this. Design needs to be, when I'm repairing a pair of jeans, I'm a designer and I'm part of the production system. Okay?
Do I have to say yes?
Now
okay.
Veronica can misbehave.
No, that's brilliant, Jessie, because you did articulate fantastically the sort of like what we're aiming for, that vision of this being a totally new way to make and have clothes, and you know, our idea of community is so important. We're only just getting going. We've got the content now, we're starting to reach out, and certainly from our point of view, we got to a point with the guidelines and we got to now send them out there to have everybody else test them. Like, we can't do the next piece of work without the community. That's the brilliant thing. So it does answer that sort of point that Gwen mentioned about how will we keep it agile, how will we keep it updated, how will we make sure that these are flexible and adaptable. Well, they're going to be designed by the people for the people. That's the nice things. We're sharing this is an open project. Okay, so I'm going to have to wrap up, which is really unfortunate because I knew it would get to this point where all the stuff I already knew had been said, and now we're getting to the juicy stuff. But Veronica, you got your hand up. Did you want to come back in, or are you saying goodbye?
No, I'm jumping up and down because I just wanted to add to what Jessie was saying about community, and actually from my experience with the European Commission, who are really world leading on this, you know, with Horizon 2020, you know, they were starting to, they attempted to bring design into the table around the conversation at the very beginning since at least 2014, and I've seen how it's taken such a long time for the consortium and the groups to sort of shift their sort of mindset from the designer coming in right at the end to sort of help exploit and come up with products for their outcomes, to actually really bringing design in right at the beginning of the conversation. And that has been really, really difficult to get across, and it's still not 100% there. So I think there's a real value, and actually what is being demonstrated is that, you know, these sorts of projects are showcased because they demonstrate the value that you get when you have a community, when you bring in all the different voices early on. So that's, I'm gonna shush now.
That's great. Oh, I'm going to get you and Jessie together for dinner sometime for sure. All of you come for dinner. I'm going to wrap up now because we have to. And Rosie's just got a few words she wants to sort of say about the next steps and how to get involved.
Thank you, Becky. What brilliant discussion. I'm not going to go on, but Jessie and Veronica, absolutely, this is what it's all about for me. It's getting those methodologies into these projects so that we have this brilliant diversity of voices. And yeah, so all I'd like to say is that for everyone who has watched and felt like compelled to do something, inspired, want to be part of the conversation, well, we've got so many ideas for how we can share the work that we're doing with the community, and that's what we're going to start to do from now until the end of the project, to really try and find ways to engage. And the way that you can do this is by going to Hereware project, click on community, roll down to the bottom of the page, find the sign in button, and then just go through a very short survey so that we can direct you to the right kind of forum within the project. And the way that it'll work is that we'll invite, we'll have events, and you can see talks within the community space, which will be privileged to the community, because we need to build up this sense of language and communication and the sense of we're working on something together. So yes, please come and visit us and collaborate with us, because we really would love to build on this brilliant starting point. So thank you to everyone, for all the speakers, all of the panelists, Letitia particularly for building this whole thing from the ground up, this event. So it's brilliant, and everyone has done brilliantly. So I hope everyone's enjoyed it. Thank you to everyone who actually visited and came to watch as well. And
thank you. Goodbye.